Okay, so in the last video, we got a wild deal on a Wurlitzer 200. Basically untouched, a little questionable, but has a lot of promise. Since then, I've taken the entire thing apart. And now I know exactly what I got myself into. This video is a little bit more about what I found inside, what surprised me, and what it's actually going to take to get this thing fully working and in great shape again. If you didn't see the first video for context, I'll link it somewhere above, but this video is definitely where things get really interesting. First off, there was just one last piece of the action assembly that I just could not figure out, but after watching one of the Emma repairs videos, I saw the location of the screw and was able to get the last piece off. Once I got that last screw out, everything came out pretty cleanly, and it gave me access to the last piece of what I needed to clean in this piano. I went through even with a toothbrush and got all the dust and debris out of here, took a vacuum to it, disinfected a couple of things, and honestly, that made a huge difference in this piano. This is where I was able to notice one thing that I had suspected. That back rail felt in there, it's a long piece of felt that runs the entire length of the action assembly. It was very compressed and obviously very dirty, just, years and years of wear. That will definitely be on the replacement list. Also, quick confession. At some point in the process, I'm 90% sure that I vacuumed up a bolt. So that led to a totally unplanned trip to Lowe's to replace it and grab a few other things I knew I'd need for this anyway. Not ideal, but honestly part of the process. Now, while I was trying to figure this out, a bunch of you guys, who clearly know more about these pianos than I do, started chiming in. Thank you so much to every single person who's written in during this process. You gave me a lot of things to think about, a ton of stuff that I hadn't considered, and I've been making a lot of notes and doing research based on what you wrote in. The first suggestion to consider was the Gojo Original Formula hand cleaner. This comment was left by someone who works in furniture restoration, and apparently it's great for a lot of these materials. The next suggestion was to use a heat gun to get some of the remaining glue off of the top of the lid. This sounds like a really great plan and makes sense, but I'm going to be a little bit cautious here. I don't really want to melt the plastic, but maybe if it's something that I hold a little further away, it won't cause a ton of problems. Truly though, the affected area is underneath that metal name rail, so if something actually happens, we may not see the problem I've just created. On the backside, buying a heat gun, which I don't yet have, is not terribly expensive, and maybe I can use it on some other projects like saxophone pads in the future. Someone also mentioned a caustic soda solution, probably something very similar to the Barkeeper's Friend that I have been using. So there's a chance that I may go back at the lid with that and like a plastic putty knife or something to get some of that glue off. Then someone left me a comment about the legs and recommended using aluminum foil on this, which I actually did last year. I bought a 1967 Ludwig acrylite snare drum. Came with just a little bit of rust on it, and that plus some WD-40 actually did take the rust off of that shell and the hardware. So I may give that a little bit of a shot again. Super good call. And then probably one of the most helpful things, someone from the comment section actually emailed me a Wurlitzer 200 manual. I probably should have thought to look for this sooner. I'm sure it's somewhere online, but now I have it and it's all good. After all of that, I put the piano back together. I'll be honest, that was a lot harder than expected. I like to tinker with things from time to time, but this is probably the first time in my life that I didn't catalog enough stuff in the process of tearing it apart. In fact, when I put it back together, unfortunately, I ended up with a couple extra pieces of hardware. I think my biggest problem here was that I took this piano apart actually over the course of kind of 3 very unconnected nights. So when it came back to assembling everything, my brain wasn't really fully connecting the dots. In fact, I had to go back and watch all of my footage that I took disassembling it just to figure out where some of those parts went. So yeah, if you're doing something like this, please document all of it. Future you is definitely going to need it. In really good news, now I feel like I have a fairly complete idea of what this piano needs, and honestly, not all that bad. Let's start with some cleaning and lubricating materials. First of all, the Gojo that was recommended if I'm going to end up going down that route. Secondly, some lubrication so that I can make sure that all of the action and everything, all the moving parts are moving correctly. Here's definitely something that I expected going in, basically all of the felts. The first that needs to be done is obviously the back rail felt. Pretty sure mine is original and never been replaced, so we need to get the old dirty compressed stuff out of there. Name rail felt is in bad shape or non-existent, and then the front rail balance rail round felt all of which are probably original and need replacing just for the sake of age. Shims. I feel like every one of those needs to be replaced. Some of them just look nasty, lightly moldy. It's actually surprising to me how expensive these are to replace, but I'd like to just do it for the sake of the cleanliness. The front rail and balance rail shims for the keys though, these were non-existent when I pulled the piano apart. I have a really good feeling that I'm going to need them too. In fact, I feel like I may need multiple sets. Just kind of taking a general overview of the side to side of like the different heights of the keys along the way, I think there's going to be a good bit of adjustment to be done there. Next up is lid hardware. It's just worth to me to do that just to get this into really good shape. And also the hardware cost is low. Next up is the power receptacle. It obviously works, but the plastic housing is cracked and I like to keep really nice things. 18 bucks for this part, and I feel like it's going to require some soldering out of me. I'm about to learn a whole lot of things about soldering for my studio in the next couple of weeks, so I'm willing to also take this on being a smaller project. Next are the hum shield screws. These are kind of in bad shape all the way across physically, and then I have most of these are Phillips head, and then I have of course one that's a flathead. Next on the list are the damper grommets. I had a feeling that when I was starting to kind of feel these out that they were losing their elasticity a little bit, and sure enough, while I was taking apart part of this piano, I actually cracked one wholly. It just almost disintegrated into a dust a little bit. With that being said, I'll just go ahead and replace the entire set. One of the people that commented in earlier recommended that I replace the 3 big capacitors in this. Truly, they've probably lost a little bit of their full frequency spectrum being as old as they are, so it might be time. Next is the sustain pedal. Actually, that was the only thing that I didn't get with this Wurlitzer. No real biggie there. I mean, I kind of know what those cost. Maybe I can find a used one for 100 bucks. Maybe I can buy a new one for 300 bucks. We'll see what happens when we get there. Thankfully, in the process of this though, I was able to borrow a sustain pedal from a friend to make sure that the sustain works. Next again is the heat gun, hopefully to get some of the glue off of that lid. Not an expensive purchase at all. I think it was like 20 bucks on Amazon. And then I was thinking about getting some 3M dual-sided tape. I did a little bit of digging about what held the name rail to that plastic lid, and I did see a whole lot of people that were commenting about how liquid cement was a pretty good way to do this, but I also saw a lot of comments that the original thing that was holding that name rail on was dual-sided tape. Last but not least, and I have actually already acquired these for a bunch of different projects, but just Armor All wipes. I feel like that'll give like a nice last sheen to the lid once I get it in really good shape. I've certainly used these on all of my Rhodes before, so I'm sure it'll work just as well here. Anyway, nothing here is wildly shocking for a piano of this age. That being said, there's a lot of these things that are going to be very easy to put into place, and a lot of these things that are going to be very long and meticulous and require a good bit of effort. I think the key leveling is going to be the most meticulous of all of this. Also, dialing in the action, things like that. But a lot of the rest of this is really straightforward. And now that I've taken this apart once, I think the next process of taking it apart and putting it back together will be a lot faster. So for now, putting this piano fully back together, packing it up, getting it into storage, and I'll put it away for a couple of weeks while we move. On the positive side, this gives me some extra time to do a little bit of research, double check my parts list, and make sure that I'm not missing anything before I make an order for parts. So thank you for hanging out with me for that. Thank you for all of your suggestions. I'm really happy actually where this stands right now. The piano's clean, back together, and I fully understand what it needs. By the way, through this whole process, I'm going to continue to watch these comments. Again, you guys called out some things that I hadn't even thought of or considered, and it made a huge difference in my process. When we do part 3 of this video coming up, we'll just dive right into restoration. And I'm really looking forward to how interesting that's going to get. See you on the next one.